Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe and turn on notifications. Darkness had always been a part of Michael's city. Power outages were so frequent that he no longer flinched when the streetlights flickered, only to plunge everything into complete blackness. But on that particular night, as he walked along the dimly lit streets on his way home, the darkness felt different. It wasn't just a regular blackout, it felt like a reflection of the life he'd been living for years, empty and unresolved. He slowly pushed open the door, the familiar creak echoing through the stillness of the house. The silence inside was heavy, broken only by the soft rustling of wind outside. The living room greeted him in the same tired way it always did. Nothing had changed. The same worn-out armchair, the coffee table slightly askew, and the faint, lingering smell of breakfast in the air. Everything was the same. Everything was predictable. Everything was dead. As soon as Michael stepped inside, a sharp crack echoed through the rooms, followed by the low hum of appliances flickering back to life. The lights blinked a few times before finally staying on, flooding the space with an uncomfortable, harsh glow. The house, which had felt like an endless void just moments ago, was now exposed under that sudden brightness, as if the return of power had somehow revealed an undeniable truth. He pulled out an old kitchen stool and sat down, feeling the cold hardwood pressing into him. He didn't bother trying to get comfortable. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. That feeling inside him, the one he couldn't ignore, had been building for months, maybe years. There was a time when his house had been full of life. Connie's laughter had echoed through the rooms. The kids ran clumsily down the hallway. The smell of lovingly prepared dinners filled the air. But now the house was just a shell. A collection of walls and furniture, occupied by people who, despite living together, no longer belonged to one another. The marriage? It had become one long silence, filled with unspoken words. Time had pushed them apart, or maybe they'd just let it happen. He wasn't sure. What he did know was that Connie had changed. For months now, her gaze had been distant, her touch less frequent, her words more calculated, like she was holding something back. Little things had started to bother him, but he ignored them. The messages she left the room to answer. The quick smiles at her phone. The excuses about working late. None of it was enough to confront her, but when pieced together, it created a troubling mosaic. And then, that night, something finally triggered the alarm. Connie was different. She dressed more carefully, paid attention to her body, her hair, her clothes, every little detail. It wasn't that he didn't want her to look good, but it wasn't for him. Knew it, he felt it when she came downstairs wearing a fitted red dress, a lipstick he hadn't seen in years, and a perfume he'd never smelled before. Something twisted inside him. He tried to pretend he didn't notice, tried to smile like everything was fine, but his questions slipped out before he could hold them. In this party, is it just for employees? She paused for a second, a second longer than she should have. Then smoothed her hair, grabbed her Persine, smiled. Yes, just employees. He nodded slowly, pretending to believe her. Can I go with you? Connie let out a short, dry laugh. Michael, it's a company party. You don't know anyone. Aether, you'll just be bored. He didn't push it. He didn't need to that answer say more than anything else she could have said. He watched her leave in a hurry, not even glancing back. The sound of her heels echoed in the hallway and the door closed gently. Behind her, Hestade, seated. The clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. The hours went by. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him was breaking. Took a deep breath, stood up slowly and went to the bedroom. He put on a simple suit, slipped on his shoes, and looked at himself in the mirror. There was no longer no anxiety. There was only the need to know the truth. Without a second thought, he grabbed his car keys and left for Theppardy. The venue's facade was impressive, with large glass windows reflecting Thessady's vibrant lights. The parking lot was full, and elegant guests were coming and going with drinks in hand, laughter drifting through the air, conversations buzzing. It was a celebration for everyone else but for Michael. There wasn't nothing to celebrate. He got out of the car, straightened his tie, and took a deep breath. He didn't know exactly what Hugh was expecting to find, but something inside him said he had to see. If for himself, it was the instinct of a man who had ignored too many signs for too long. When he walked through the glass door, was greeted by a sophisticated scene. Huge chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow on walls adorned with Luxurious daedals, instrumental music blended with murmur of voices. Michael moved slowly, noticing every detail. Women in long gowns held champagne flutes. Men in sharp suits talked about important matters. He scanned the room, searching for the familiar shape of Connie. She had to be somewhere in there. He quietly approached the bar and ordered a whiskey. As the golden liquid filled his glass, he felt a presence. Beside him, a group of executives was chatting energetically, discussing the company and future plans. Then he overheard something that made him pause for a moment. Duffa's big plans for Connie. He's grooming her for a higher position, it was said by a well-dressed man with gray hair who held his glass with the confidence of Simeon, who knew more then he should. The other around him laughed knowingly, as if there was a subtext only they could catch. Michael felt his chest tighten. It wasn't just the words, it was the Tenevi way it was said, like there was Moretto, this promotion, then met the isomething. Everyone knew but him. He kept this expression blank, holding his glass but not drinking. He pretended not to carry, but his mind was racing. His instincts were screaming. He was overwhelmed by the feeling that something was very wrong, a creeping Gunies like a quiet alarm. He needed to find her. Slowly he put his glass down on the counter and began to walk. The main hall was large, but Michael knew that if Connie was up to something, she wouldn't right there in the open for everyone to see. So he started looking in the more secluded list. As he moved farther from Thebrity, the noise faded, the music sounded distant. The chatter, just a gentle hummed carpet, muffled his footsteps as Hepist closed doors, some slightly ajar rooms for meetings or more private gatherings. His heart pounded and hissed, but he refused to run. He refused to look desperate. With each step the feeling grew stronger that he was about to see something that would change everything. He passed a group of employees whispering in a corner. One gave another a quick glance when they saw him, a look that spoke louder than words. He kept going. A darker corridor, a row of closed doors, and then there she was. Connie hurried back to him, standing beside Doug. She was holding a wine glass, gesturing naturally, like their closeness was completely normal. She leaned in just a bit toward him, like she'd forgotten there was a husband in the picture. Michael didn't move. He made no sound. He just watched. Doug smiled lightly, touched her arm, and she didn't pull away. It was a small gesture, almost unnoticeable, but not for Michael. He knew his wife. He knew that look. He knew how she acted around him, and in that moment knew Connie wasn't just there. Forward, Michael stayed still, hidden in Thekerider's dim light, staring at the scene unfolding in front of him. Doug bent toward Connie, whispered something that made her smile, a smile Michael hadn't seen in years, a free, intimate techno-wingle before he could even fully process it. Doug gently held her face, his fingertips moving over her skin in a way that was all too familiar, and then kissed her. It wasn't a hesitant kiss, not a moment of doubt. It was something they both clearly expected. Connie didn't flinch or look startled. On the contrary, she closed her eyes and let it happen, like she'd gone down this road many times before. And at that exact second, something inside Michael snapped. His chest rose and fell slowly, but there was no air left in him, just a piercing cold taking over every part of fist. Being his hands shook, but not with rage, with certainty. Without looking away, he slid his hand into his pocket, took out his phone, and silently opened the camera. If that was what Connie wanted, then that was what she'd get. His phone screen captured it all, the kiss, the surrender, betrayal happening right before high size. He held it steady, keeping their recording clear. He didn't need words, didn't need excuses, just the plain raw truth. And he would keep that truth for when the time was right. His mind tried to sort things out to find an explanation, but there was no room left for excuses. If only she had hesitated. Ifenly, there had been a hint of guilt, a second of doubt, the slightest sign of respect for her own family. But no, Connie gave in. She accepted it, and that hurt more than any physical betrayal could. Michael couldn't remember the last time she had kissed him like that. He couldn't remember the last time she looked at him the way she was looking at Doug right then. He had lost this battle long before even realized he was in one. His hand clenched into a fist, knuckles whitening, the urge to rush and drag Doug away a skin front of everyone. How long this had been going on to blow up came like a lightning bolt, but it passed because Michael had never been a man whom it seems. He took a deep breath, let himself feel every in that moment, let the pain burn but not take control. Then he took a step back and another. He turned around, leaving the shadows of the hallway, walking away without either of them noticing. They were too busy to see him on his way back. Through the ballroom, the music returned to his ears, the buzz of laughter and clinking glasses surrounded him again. It was as if nothing had happened, as if his world hadn't just caved in. He moved through the crowd without hurry, without expression, with no outward sign of anger, but inside a decision had already been made. He wasn't going to confront Hearth at night, noiling arguments, no scandal for anyone towitness. There would just be an ending, gan that ending would come on his terms. Slipped out through the exit tunnelized and got into his car, shutting door with a sharp click. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, high size, said it all. There was no explosive anymore, no blind hatred. There was only a cold, cutting silence and a decision. He drove with no music, no radio, just the soft sound of the tires on the asphalt. The streets were quiet, lit by street lights that illuminated his path like beacons on a road of no return. When finally parked in front of his house, stayed in the car for a while, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of everything. He now knew the electricity that had come back on before he left still lit the house, but inside him everything felt dark. He opened the door and walked in. Everything was just ash, left it cold, silent, impersonal. For the first time, he saw the house for what it wasn't, a home, but a stage for an empty marriage, kept alive only by habit. Without hesitation, he went to a cabinet in the office, took out a folder of documents and opened it. On the table, the divorce papers were already there. They'd been discussed ages ago, back when Kanye still pretended to care, when both of them still had the energy to fake that something might be saved. But like everything else in their life, that paperwork had been forgotten in the predictable daily grind. Now there was no more need for conversation. He took out his phone, opened his photo gallery and scrolled to the last recording. The video was there, intact, clear, impossible to dispute. Without taking his eyes off the screen, hit the share button and attached a message, a parting gift. Without another word, he sent it to Kanye's number. Then he picked up the folder, set it on the living room table, and left the divorce papers open next to them, helpless, the little velvet box he'd kept since the day he asked her to marry. Hemicycle closed right there in front of his own eyes. All that remained was for her to sign. Michael didn't go upstairs. He didn't want to see her come home acting like nothing had happened, hadn't want to hear lies, excuses, or justifications. He already had the truth, and that was all he needed. Half an hour later, the sound of a car screeching to a halt outside broke the night silence. Michael stayed seated. He didn't move, had just waited. The front door was unlocked in a rush, and Connie burst in like a storm. Her hair was a mess, her makeup slightly smeared, her eyes wide. She was holding her phone, shaking as she clutched it. The screen's glow lit up her pale face. She looked like she had run all the way there, maybe left the party. Second she saw the message, the shock was still etched into every part of her face. Michael remained on the cushion, moving cold and shaken. He didn't need to ask a thing. She already knew exactly what he had witnessed. Michael, she said, her voice raspy, almost a whisper, full of desperation. It's not what you think, the classicus. Michael didn't bother responding. He just tilted his head slightly, like he was waiting to see how far she'd go with that lie. I can't explain, she said, taking a step closer, still holding her phone like she could somehow undo what was already done, like she could erase the truth he'd just seen with his own eyes. Michael let out a dry low, hollow, without any emotion. Explain, he finally said, crossing his arms. Explain what? That wasn't you, that wasn't your boss, that kiss never happened. Connie opened her mouth but couldn't form any words. The weight of truth was an impenetrable wall. The silence that followed was worse than any shout. Michael stood up, but not with aggression. His moves were calculated, like a man who'd already made his peace with his decision. He walked over to the table and picked up the folder of documents, setting it gently in front of her. I have everything ready, he said, his voice calm, cold, relentless. All you have to do is sign. Connie's eyes went from the folder back to him, desperation shining on her face. Michael, please, it was a mistake. Her voice trembled. Yes, it was, he said, taking one step back, his gaze locked on hers. And no, you'll deal with the consequences. She shook her head, panic raging like a wildfire. She'd expected yelling, she'd expected fury, or for him to slam doors and make a scene, but no, his contempt was more painful than any emotional explosion could have been. This isn't fair, she managed to say, her voice cracking. You're going to destroy everything over just one moment. Michael blinked slowly, as though that was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Silence that followed cut like a blade. She just stood there, frozen, defeated, consumed by her own shame. Michael picked up his keys from the table and headed for the door. He didn't look back. I'll come back tomorrow to get me things. And with that he left. Hadn't give her the chance to say anything else, didn't look back. Michael was never an impulsive man, but he wasn't the type to leave things hanging either. The next morning, after sleeping peacefully for the first time in years, he knew exactly what he needed to do, sitting at the kitchen table in a small downtown hotel's new temporary home, far from threat of a failing marriage. He picked up his phone, opened the gallery, and found the video of the betrayal. He watched it again, but this time without pain or anxiety, only with the certainty that Hugh was about to close this chapter for good. Opened an email. Recipient: the compagnie. Subject: a necessary coefficient. Dear Board, I hope this message finds you well as the husband betrayed by one of your high-ranking employees, and knowing the affair happened on company property with one of your executives, I'd like to understand if this behavior aligns with the values you claim to uphold. I believe that before promoting people, it might be wise to consider their priorities more carefully. Attached is a revealing video. Attached the file. Reviewed everything calmly and sent it with a hesitation. Now it was just a matter of time. The response came fast. That same afternoon, Doug was summoned to a private meeting with the directors. Within an hour, he was no longer with the company. His departure was discreet, no public announcement. Just an unexpected resignation, but everyone knew it wasn't voluntary. Connie, on the other hand, wasn't less urgently, but the humiliation was far worse. Once the company star respected for her position, she saw her office cleared out and her responsibility whiled down to a meaningless role. The admiring glances she used to get were replaced by whispers and Judge M. She tried to hold on, tried to act like nothing had happened, but every time she stepped into the elevator and saw people avoid her gaze, she knew there was no escape that night. Desperate, she called Michael 1,210 times. Nothing. Then the message started. Please, Michael, we need to talk. I made a mistake, but it can't end like this. For God's sake, pick up. Her desperation grew with every silent response. She wasn't the center of his world anymore. And now she felt what it was like to be cast aside, but Michael didn't want explanations, didn't want fights, didn't want to see her tears. He already had everything he needed. Friends asked if maybe he'd taken it too far, if he really needed to end the marriage over this. Michael would just smile calmly and say, would you lend out your wife for a weekend? And the silence that followed was always things where he moved on with his life, hestered it over, and he didn't need to look back. The kids who had once seen their mother as a role model stood by their father they already knew about. The affair, they'd noticed the signs but waited for Michael to figure it out on his own. And when he did, there wasn't a decision to Makisht already made it for them. Kanai tried to convince them, begged them, toasting up for her, but the emptiness in their expressions was more hurtful than any harsh reply they could have given him. You made your choice. Now you have to live with it, and with that she lost everything over time. Michael realized that perfect revenge wasn't about shouting, destroying, or feeding hate. It was simply about moving on, without looking back. Some pain doesn't need a response, it just needs an ending. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.